Welcome back, everyone. We're about to take a deep dive into, well, a pretty pivotal moment in American history, I'd say.
Yeah, I think pivotal is a good word for it. Definitely sets the stage for a lot of what comes later.
We're talking about Bill Clinton's first year in office, 1993. A lot of hope, a lot of expectations riding on this new president, this new Democrat, as he called himself.
And to get that inside look, we're going straight to the source. Bob Woodward. The Agenda. This book, it's not just, a rehash of events.
Right. It's Woodward. He goes deep.
Oh, yeah, deep dive is right. He got hundreds of hours of interviews with the people right there in the thick of it.
So we're talking advisors, cabinet members, probably some late-night strategizing sessions captured in there.
You get a feel for the personalities, the power struggles, the weight of all those campaign promises suddenly hitting the reality of governing.
And Clinton comes in with this really strong team. You've got Lloyd Bentsen, the veteran at Treasury,
Yeah.
Robert Rubin shaping the economic policy, Gene Sperling. Bright guy, focused on those long-term investments.
A real sense of, we can do this, A lot of energy, optimism.
But then reality bites. Hard. Deficit projections come in way higher than anyone expected, like $50 billion higher.
Oof. That's got to be a punch in the gut.
Yes, suddenly it's not just about bold new programs. It's about fiscal responsibility. Tough choices right out of the gate.
And that's where you start to see the cracks. Internal debates heat up. Alice Rivlin, Leon Panetta, they're pushing hard for deficit reduction no matter what.
Saying it's the only way to stabilize the economy in the long run.
Exactly. But then you've got Robert Reich. He's fighting tooth and nail to protect those investments in education, job training.
He's the one saying, don't sacrifice the future for short-term gains. Yeah. Really passionate about it.
Absolutely. And Clinton's caught in the middle. He wants to deliver on those campaign promises, but the numbers just aren't adding up.
And that leads to, well, a broken promise that really stings. The middle-class tax cut. Gone.
That one came back to haunt him for sure. It became this symbol of, Washington eating your ideals.
Yeah, the compromises you have to make.
Mm-hmm. To regain some ground, Clinton shifts focus, starts talking about taxing the wealthy, trying to tap into that populist energy.
But even that creates problems. James Carville, Raging Cajun, he's saying it's not enough, doesn't go far enough.
Not populist enough. Others are worried about alienating the business community. So Clinton's walking a tightrope.
And then comes the BTU tax. Remember that. The energy tax.
Yeah.
Meant to be this win-win. Raise revenue, fight pollution.
A good idea on paper, but boy, did it backfire.
Big time. And it shows how, good policy isn't enough in Washington. It's all about how you sell it, how the public perceives it.
It was supposed to be a slow rollout, keep it vague.
But then Benson, bless his heart, he goes on Meet the Press and just blurts it out. Confirms the whole thing before Clinton's ready.
Oh, man. That was a disaster.
The media backlash. Republicans are going nuts, and even some moderate Democrats like David Bourne, they feel betrayed. Like Clinton's turned his back on the middle class.
Talk about a miscalculation. Suddenly, this simple energy tax becomes a symbol of everything people hate about Washington.
And the fight to pass the economic plan becomes a real nail-biter. Clinton's getting squeezed from both sides. Republicans are a no-go, and even some Democrats are wavering.
Woodward does a great job capturing attention. You've got this block of Democrats led by Dave McCurdy. They're holding out, demanding concessions.
It all comes down to the wire.
Yeah, you really get a sense of how tough it was for Clinton. His first 100 days, not exactly smooth sailing.
Setbacks, low approval ratings. He's starting to feel the heat. Disillusioned, maybe even a bit betrayed by the whole Washington game.
And that leads to a pretty drastic move, bringing in David Gragan, a Republican advisor, no less.
Trying to bolster his image, appeal to the center.
It's a gamble. Some see it as a sign of weakness. Others think it's smart politics, shows Clinton's willing to adapt.
Stephanopoulos is definitely not happy about it. Feels like he's being sidelined.
So yeah, the BTU tax, the economic battle, bringing in Gergen, it all adds up to a pretty steep learning curve for Clinton.
He's realizing that governing, it's not about grand pronouncements. It's about compromise, backroom deals, figuring out how to survive in this system.
The question is, can you do that and still hold on to your ideals? Can you change the system from within without becoming part of the problem?
Big questions.
Yeah.
And the agenda really forces you to wrestle with them. But there's another layer to this story, a fascinating one. Hillary Clinton.
Ah, yes. She's not just standing by her man. She's a force to be reckoned with.
Throughout the book, you see her challenging The Economist, pushing them to explain their policies in plain language.
Making sure they don't lose sight of the real people these decisions affect.
And she's a driving force behind healthcare reform, really pushing for a bold approach, even when others are saying, pump the brakes.
She's not afraid to ruffle feathers, really committed to making a difference.
And that brings up another key theme that runs through the book: perception versus reality. It's not enough to have good ideas. You have to know how to communicate them.
And control the narrative, which, as we saw with the BTU tax, the Clinton administration didn't always do very well.
They got bogged down in the weeds, lost sight of the big picture message, the one that got Clinton elected.
It makes you think, how do we make sure that good policies that are actually meant to help people, don't get lost in the political noise?
Right. How do we break through that?
Yeah.
The agenda doesn't give us all the answers, but it sure makes us ask the right questions.
It's a reminder that politics is messy, complicated, and sometimes, it's downright frustrating. But it's also about people, real people whose lives are affected by the decisions made in those rooms.
And that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating. We're not just talking about abstract policies. We're talking about human stories, about ambition, about the struggle to make a difference in a system that often feels rigged against you.
Exactly. And the agenda gives us this incredible window into that world, a world that, in many ways, hasn't changed all that much.
We're just scratching the surface here. There's so much more to unpack about Clinton's first year, the challenges he faced, the triumphs, the setbacks, the lessons he learned.
Lessons that are still relevant today, I'd say.
Absolutely. So stick with us as we keep digging into the agenda. This is a deep dive you won't want to miss.
Shifting gears a bit, another big issue during this first year was the stimulus package. Seemed like a no-brainer at the time.
Right. Get some money flowing, create jobs, boost the economy.
Exactly. But even that, something that should have had bipartisan support, it became a battle.
Yeah, what was with that? The economy wasn't exactly roaring back to life.
Well, Clinton was still an outsider. He had this mandate from the people, but he didn't fully grasp the power dynamics in Washington.
The old guard, the established way of doing things.
Right, and he underestimated it. Those relationships, the way things had always been done, they carried a lot of weight.
So even with a popular mandate, the system itself kind of resisted him.
Absolutely. And the stimulus package, it got gutted. All those investments Clinton had talked about slashed. It was a real blow to his political capital.
Made him look weak, even though he was pushing for something that seemed pretty logical.
It's a good example of how Washington can grind even the best intentions down, And it brings us back to that question of compromise.
Can you really achieve bold change without sacrificing some of your ideals along the way?
Yeah, and that becomes even more apparent when we get to healthcare reform. This was Hillary Clinton's baby. She was passionate about it.
Healthcare was, and still is, such a hot-button issue.
Oh, absolutely. People were anxious about access, about costs. And it wasn't just a Republican versus Democrat thing. There were divisions within the Democratic Party, too.
Some folks wanted a single-payer system. Others were more market-oriented.
Right. And Clinton, he tried to find that middle ground, tried to please everyone.
Which is pretty much impossible in Washington.
Pretty much. And while they did make some progress on healthcare, it wasn't the sweeping overhaul that Hillary had envisioned.
Led to a lot of questions about whether they'd bitten off more than they could chew.
Maybe. But amidst all this political wrangling, there were still moments where Clinton's charisma, his ability to connect with people, it really shone through.
Woodward talks about this speech Clinton gave to House Democrats, trying to rally support for his economic plan.
With his back against the wall, he delivers this powerful, almost inspirational speech.
Reminds them why they're there, what they're fighting for. It's a glimpse of the Clinton who won over so many voters.
Exactly. And those moments, they remind you that even in the midst of all the cynicism and gridlock, there's still room for hope.
For leadership that can inspire and motivate people.
Right. It's about never losing sight of that human element, of the fact that these policies, they impact real lives.
And that's what we'll keep exploring as we delve deeper into the agenda. How Clinton navigated this first year. The highs and lows, the compromises, the battles. It's a fascinating story.
It really is. And it offers valuable insights into how power works, how change happens, and the challenges of leading a nation.
It's amazing to think about how much Clinton had to learn on the fly that first year. He went from campaigning on hope and change to facing the hard realities of Washington pretty quickly.
It was a crash course in the art of the possible, that's for sure.
He had to learn to navigate a system that's designed to resist big changes, to work within a framework of entrenched power and competing interests.
And as we saw with the BTU tax and the stimulus package, Even good ideas can get derailed by political gamesmanship and the constant pressure to manage public perception.
It's a reminder that the presidency isn't a position of absolute power. It's about persuasion, negotiation, finding ways to move the needle without getting completely stuck in the mud.
And that decision to bring in David Gergen, the Republican strategist, it really underscores that point, doesn't it?
It was a risky move, definitely raised some eyebrows. Stephanopoulos was not happy about it, felt like he was being pushed aside.
But it also shows that Clinton was willing to adapt, to try different approaches to get things done.
It makes you wonder how those early experiences shaped his approach to governing later on. Did he become more pragmatic, more willing to compromise, or did he hold on to his ideals even more fiercely?
Those are questions worth pondering as you dig deeper into the agenda. And that's one of the things that makes this book so relevant even today. It's not just a history lesson, it's a study in leadership and the challenges of wielding power and making those tough choices.
One of the things I really appreciate about Woodward's work is how he brings those human elements to the forefront. We see Clinton's frustrations, his moments of doubt.
It reminds us that even presidents are human, wrestling with complex issues and the weight of enormous responsibility.
Those glimpses of vulnerability make the story all the more compelling. We see Clinton's determination to keep pushing forward even when he gets knocked down.
It's a reminder that true leadership isn't about being perfect. It's about learning from mistakes, adapting to new situations, and never losing sight of the bigger picture.
In Clinton's case, that bigger picture was a better future for the American people. And whether you agree with his policies or not, you can't deny his passion, his commitment to that vision.
And the agenda gives us this incredible behind-the-scenes look at how that vision collided with the realities of governing.
It's a fascinating study in the dynamics of power, the compromises that are often necessary, and the enduring struggle to balance idealism with pragmatism.
If you're intrigued by this deep dive, I highly encourage you to pick up a copy of the agenda. You can find a link to purchase the book in our show notes.
And if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the deep dive and share it with anyone who might be interested in exploring the inner workings of power and politics. The more we understand the past, the better equipped we are to shape the future. Thanks for joining us.